BEMA seminars were actually attended by different scholars from different backgrounds: historians, art conservators, cultural heritage conservators, and archaeologists. Now I'm having the pleasure to present you Mr. David Hendricks. Mr. David Hendricks is the creator of the Byzantine Legacy website and social media project on the Byzantine Empire, and it has been around for more than a decade. And this project mainly focuses on the Byzantine sites of modern Istanbul and its surroundings. But however, he also extensively travels around Anatolia and the Balkans and beyond, researching and photographing dozens of archaeological sites and museums for this project and related to the Byzantine legacy and Byzantine cultural heritage. The project, with exceptions of help, with a limited number of texts and on a few pages, is solely due to his research, photography, website creation, and social media posts. While he's not academic in the related fields, the texts are based on summaries of academic research on various sites. The aim is to turn the project into a scholarly supported and funded project with academic oversight. He's an American currently living in Istanbul. I have to admit that his website, from very entrepreneurial web source, became a very serious source for a Byzantinist and medievalist from across the globe. We have the pleasure to invite Mr. David Hendricks to present the Byzantine legacy and his project before you. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Let me see if I can figure out how to share my screen properly. Is it sharing properly, or is it still sharing?
I believe this is the other way around. I mean, okay. Yeah.
Here we go. I think you can see the slides now. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so thank you very much for inviting me to explain my project. Sorry, I'm not really sure what's going on with my video. It's very strange and grainy, and but I guess mainly pay attention to the presentation. So as you just heard, my name is David Hendricks, and I'm the sole creator of the Byzantine Legacy, which I made to provide information about Byzantium, Eastern Rome. If you're familiar with it, you might know that its primary focus is on Istanbul, where I live now. So I'm living in Istanbul. And I first, in case you don't know my project, I thought I would first give a very basic overview of what it is, and then I'll go on to how I've made it, and also some possible future directions it can go in. So first of all, I'll show you the main page for the website. And it has so much more that needs to be developed, but here's the main entry page. And one of the main pages on the website is an overview of the churches of Byzantine Constantinople, Istanbul. And each church, which is now are mostly mosques, has its own web page. Not only are they the existing monuments, but also monuments that are in ruins, and even a few that don't exist anymore have pages. And here's a Google map that I made, which has been viewed 150,000 times. Simply, there's just nothing like this. And this is kind of how I came to create this project. So each church has its own, each church mosque in most cases, has its own page. And here's an example of one, Sergius and Bacchus, the little Hagia Sophia mosque. When I first came to this site, there was very little information about what this was. There still really isn't much. So, so here, for example, you have an overview of its architecture, its history. It's got this amazing inscription inside. So it has the original Greek and a translation. Also, it's comparing this monument to other monuments, for example, San Vitale in Ravenna, which was also made by Justinian. And also other buildings that, for example, don't exist that were outside of Istanbul that shared features with it. Another page or groups of pages, let's say, are the imperial monuments in Rome and Istanbul. So each monumental column, triumphal arch, that sort of thing, has its own page in Istanbul. And also there are several key monuments in Rome that are similar in features, that are kind of, for example, the Arch of Septimius Severus, which is a kind of predecessor for the Arch of Constantine, which also monuments in Istanbul were copying this as well. And of course, the columns of Trajan and Marcus Aurelius, Theodosius, and his son Arcadius copied this design. Another page, and this is actually a group of pages on Genoese Galata, Byzantine and Genoese Galata. I've actually had a lot of help with Dr. Sercan Salam, a Turkish scholar whose area of research is on the Genoese monuments of Turkey in general, and particularly focusing on Istanbul. And one of the really incredible pages he helped me make is the entire list of Latin inscriptions from the late medieval walls of Genoa. And here's some samples of this. And also, one of the key features of my website is sharing different historical images of different monuments or spaces, like you can see here with Galata, and the layers of history, different periods of time where we can see more monuments existing or a different urban fabric that's changed over time. Yeah, so then let me tell you about another aspect of my project is a social media. So I have a large archive of photos, and I'm regularly sharing them on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. I started with Facebook and then went to Twitter, which has become the biggest place. So this is a very recent screenshot. In the next month or so, it's going to reach 70,000 followers. And here's some of the stuff I've done on Instagram. I started much more recently, and it's actually going to it just reached 35,000 this week. Facebook, which is dying, has about 35,000. So here's the website. It drops during Christmas because it's being used quite a lot in universities, but it's reaching 14, 15, sometimes 16,000 hits a month. Next, I'd like to talk about, one more thing. And I have a huge archive, which I'm still sorting through a lot more images on Flickr. And as you can see, there's like 43,000 photos. I have a huge archive of Hagia Sophia and Kora and other monuments. Here's an example of also the things from different museums that I have. So let me tell you about how I started my project. So first of all, it's very important to know that I am not a Byzantinist. I'm not an architect historian. And I came to this, we could say, quite by accident to a certain degree. So I went to Rome in 2014, and I had been living in Istanbul for a while. And as soon as I went to Rome, it was my first time to visit, I had this very long, extensive list to visit. I was actually on my way to visit a friend in Spain, and I just had one day in Rome on the way to Madrid, and one day on my way back. And I had kept saying I would do this in Istanbul, look at the old Rome of Istanbul. And I had visited some sites, but I really wanted to make the same thing I had done in Rome. And once I was in Rome, I was thinking about Istanbul and how I actually need to do that. So basically in Rome, I decided I would look at the new Rome and hunt for it and try to really visit every monument. I was very busy for the next few months, but I already had an amateur's enthusiasm about art, but I didn't really know much about architecture. And creating this project is really quite an accident, I can say. So first I began to visit some of the key monuments of Byzantine Istanbul. I had seen some of them, some I hadn't really paid much attention to, but I really began to pay attention to note their architecture features, to try to learn about them, and became really impressed when I started to see how many monuments are surviving in the city that, you know, that kind of likes to hide its Byzantine past. And I really for example, the Svendome of the Hippodrome, this amazing monument that shows you what the Hippodrome was. It's this really, there's no signs marking Bokaleon, the Hippodrome, very little about the Hippodrome spaces and the different monuments like the obelisk of Theodosius. And yeah, so also trying to find a list of these things is quite difficult. So I started going around the city and trying to collect a list, which is very, 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 very hard to do if you're not an academic and you have access to the certain books. Even a monument like Sergius Tabacus, the famous Strolling Through Byzantine Constantinople, John Freely's work, has a paragraph on it. So you have all of these inscriptions all over the city. UNESCO World Heritage Sites, not accessible unless you know Greek or Latin, and even if you don't have good eyes, you can't really read them because it can be quite far away. And I realized there is something very serious lacking in accessing the monuments, especially for the public. And I also did some work. I started finding out about all the underground monuments of the city, cisterns and other things like this. And I stumbled across the work of Dr. Kerem Altuğ, who documented more than 150 cisterns in the city. I thought, this can't be possible. And not all of them in his work still exist. So also he's recording things that were recorded that don't exist, but it's incredible what's also hiding underneath the city. And also the work of Byzantium 1200, I came across a book, The Great Palace Region, and also how he tried to recreate what the city was like, as you can see in the image in the top left corner. And unfortunately, his work is absolutely amazing, and I think it's a bit too neglected by the city, which has this amazing resource. And often, I also have to say, I often find scholars using his work and not even citing him or anything like this. So Tayfun Oner has done amazing work, working with very important scholars like Albrecht Berger and others to actually seriously work on recreating the city as much as we can. And I found these amazing monuments. For example, the two bottom images, this is under a carpet shop where you have mosaic floors, a late antique mosaic floor. Underneath it, you have a medieval substructure and this wonderful Ayasma, holy spring, with a fresco of the Virgin Mary. Unfortunately, the shop closed and you can't access it anymore, but this is the kind of thing that is winding around in Istanbul and no one easily has access to information about it. I also went to the Merayon, Bodrum Mosque, the underground mosque, and found it has this amazing cistern that was a rotunda. Here you can see a map that Kerem Altuğ made of the cisterns of the city. And more cisterns that Kerem Altuğ has been very, very helpful to show me archival material in the municipality, show me places like the cistern on the bottom right that is not open, it's not open to the public. And the Merayon, the Merayon Monastery, now Bodrum Mosque, this is an incredible monument. As you can see, if you look at the picture now, there is a plaque, a kind of that gives you information. But when I went there was nothing. This has a substructure with frescoes, usually locked to the public. A cistern that was used as a workshop. I mean, as a bunch of different shops for basically Russian tourists once upon a time. They removed all the shops, making it more open. An amazing collection of capitals, late antique capitals, and something that I think even many scholars do not know, that this is the second largest known rotunda of the Roman world, bigger than the one in Thessaloniki. And only the Pantheon in Rome is bigger. And it's sitting underneath concrete, no information about this still. And so I was going to other sites outside the city, understanding that Galata has a rich layer of history that's not known. There in the Hebdomon, Bakırköy, there's a Hippogeum at a hospital, a psychiatric hospital, no signs there, it's full of rubbish. Even things like Eidos Castle, which is also very important in early Ottoman history, not really well known, no information, no tourists are going there. And even Mimar Sinan, the most famous Ottoman architect, he has this amazing aqueduct system, which was built on and even using parts of the old Byzantine system. The story is that Sultan Suleiman was hunting in the forest, heard some water. What's this? There's basically the ruins of the Byzantine system, and Sinan rebuilt it. Even this is often very much neglected by the city, its inhabitants. It's not really considered to be a site for tourism, local tourism, foreign tourism. A very much neglected, wonderful, rich part of Istanbul's history. And I continued out further, for example, going to Thrace, this amazing monastery caves. A friend of mine who's doing his doctoral thesis, I believe is working on maybe 25 rock-cut caves of Turkish Thrace, just the Turkish side part. So you have this amazing, rich heritage of monasteries, rock-cut monasteries. Yarımburgaz is also a Paleolithic cave. And again, no signs, maybe junkies are going there sometimes. You have the long walls, the Anastasian walls that went across from the Black Sea to the Marmara Sea, and the aqueduct system there, which was the longest aqueduct system the Romans ever made. A few of them are known, some of them are on Google Maps, but most of them are not accessible. People don't know where they are. And of course, the problem also you can have is treasure hunters. And actually during the pandemic, someone damaged this wonderful aqueduct that you can see in the bottom right corner. Also Bithynia, really rich and wonderful, amazing heritage. Iznik, of course, people know, but it has these incredible walls. There are some inscriptions. There's not much information there. Only this Hagia Sophia is something that kind of gets highlighted. A rich city with amazing history, including the Crusades, the Seljuks, not just the Byzantines. Really not much that really helps you understand the history of the city. And many, many church ruins. Karakilisi, the Black Church, which apparently was a late antique bath turned into a church. And many on the Black Sea coast, on the Marmara Sea coast, you have several churches. Again, no signs, in ruins, neglected monuments. The church on the bottom right is full of fragmentary frescoes being rained on. It's a complicated legal issue about actually restoring this. The Orthodox Church is trying to get it. The Patriarchate is trying to get it. So I also understood that one of the things to understand Istanbul is you need to go to some other cities. So Ravenna has this amazing late antique heritage, sometimes directly connected to patronage in Constantinople, as you can see with Justinian's mosaic in the bottom right corner. Venice, of course, helped loot the city and really damage it in 1204 in the Fourth Crusade. It's full of amazing remains from the city. So I visited this in 2015, and this is when I really started to properly develop, like this is something I need to put energy into and to see. In Greece, I went to places like Athens, Thessaloniki, Mistras, Monomvasia. I had been to Athens before, and actually someone who actually studied philosophy, coming very far from this background of Byzantine studies and architecture and medieval Balkan and Eastern Mediterranean heritage, went there looking for the city of Socrates and Pericles, and saw these Byzantine churches when I had been before. But this time I went to understand that this city had a long history. Byzantium is a way to help understand going from the past until modernity. It's the big piece that we forget. Of course, Athens was also under the Crusade control for a while. And other places like Mistras, that a place that's, of course, if you're from this region, you might know as a gem of Byzantine art, Orthodox art, but it's not something that's known by too many people beyond that. And a wonderful place like Monomvasia, which has Byzantine, Venetian, and Ottoman heritage. It's basically like a medieval, early modern city still. Not well enough known. And of course, sorry, this slide really shouldn't be here, but understanding there's this really rich heritage of images that not many people have access to. This city does not really present these images. This is an amazing engraving of the Hippodrome by an Italian, probably from around mid-16th century and published towards the late 16th century. Here's the Hippodrome. You can see what it looked like before. So this rich images, I began to realize, are also a very important source to understand the city. And I've had a lot of help from different tour guides. So, for example, Sheriff Yanin, who's helped me see many things. I'm actually doing a tour with him tomorrow. And Yasin Karabajak have helped me go to see things that are not easily accessible. Guljami, the Rose Mosque, for example, has a very small chapel in its apse, kind of about halfway up from to the half dome. Not many people know about it. All kinds of legends are discussed about it, including this being the burial place of the last Byzantine emperor, which of course is not possible, but still, that is not accessible to many people. The Imam knows Yasin and he's helped me see many places. And so I have been visiting many different places around the region. As you can see, majority of them are in Turkey, but Bulgaria, Greece, some other places in Serbia and Northern Macedonia, and also Rome. I recently was in Georgia for the first time and visited about 10 different sites there. And so that's I guess the first part of my presentation. Let me go back to the beginning here. And so this is something that I'm not a scholar. I really base all my research on, actually, let me come here, on summaries of real academic texts, the leading academic text. And I have had some help from scholars, but my plan is for this to be funded. I've been talking with lots of different people about these options. I still don't fully understand that aspect. I want to have an academic board that has at least one person from Greece, Turkey, Bulgaria, and Serbia. And I want to work with people in the Balkans and Eastern Mediterranean. Also, perhaps their English isn't so great, to help them get their information out there and the research be more accessible. And there's lots of other ideas I have, for example, to develop an app for different cities that perhaps has video and audio to help make these places more accessible. And my images also are now regularly being used by scholars in Harvard, in Yale, and Oxford Press, and other lesser known journals and that sort of thing. So during the pandemic, many people have been reaching out to me asking for images. And of course, I'm very happy to provide this resource. And yes, I think that I would be very interested in having some questions and also some discussions about how this project could go forward. So Yvonne, I guess if you would like to continue this.
Thank you, David. It was really nice to learn not only about the project, but also how it started. So I would suggest to raise your hand if you have a question for David. So raise your hand and I'll be happy to read your question for David and ask him, or give you the floor to ask David directly. And I will ask everyone who is actually asking a question to present himself. Okay, first question from Carol Schneier. How do you balance presenting more information about the historic site with possible damage to the site from over-visitation? How do you balance, actually?
First of all, that's not a big problem with most of the stuff that I'm dealing with. Most of these sites, most scholars don't even visit them. So, it's really incredible how under-visited this area is, including inside of the modern Istanbul, the walls, UNESCO heritage sites even. So that is not that big of a problem, I have to say. But it could be more of a problem in certain places in the Balkans, perhaps. But I have less experience about that. And I guess this is much more of an issue with the bigger issue that's kind of related to this would be more about treasure hunters who are damaging monuments. And it's a very serious problem. I mean, in the Balkans, but it's a very serious problem in Turkey. Even Bukolia Palace, which is inside of the city, there's now very serious archaeological work going there, doing a really great job. Treasure hunters were in the middle of the night, in very close to Sultan Ahmed, digging around there, I guess 2018, and damaged it a little bit. So that's people stealing stuff. People, I mean, things have gone missing from the walls. There was an eagle in Yedikule, probably Middle Byzantine eagle that, let's say, flew away. So that's a bigger problem. And I do talk to people about that. For example, if I'm sharing something on social media, I don't say where it is. I'm careful about, for example, sharing inscriptions, because there are certain ones that in particular that are very easy targets for someone to steal. And that does happen. So I have different people I'm talking to who know these things very well to help me think about that and not share where things are. That'd be one thing.
Thank you, David. We have a question from someone with abbreviation PNNY. Welcome.
Hi, it's actually Tom Elliott, but I'm on my mum's computer, so thank you. The question I have is, how much support or lack of support are you getting from the authorities? Because presumably they may well see this as a boost to tourism, because there's so little to go on, for the tourist on this period of their history. But having listened to what you just said to the previous question, I'm now beginning to wonder if that's such a good thing anyway. But what is the response from the authorities to what you're doing?
Well, I mean, still, this is, let's say, quote unquote, an amateur project. I mean, once it really has an organization of funding, I think that's kind of issue become more important. But I can see from what's happening on social media, for example, who's following me and that sort of thing. So, I mean, Istanbul has a new mayor, and we've never interacted with each other, but I know that he likes what I'm doing. His right-hand man, basically, Mahir Polat, for example, is following my project. There's also political issues about like highlighting this too much. But so anyway, but I can see that there's lots of different people, including the former director of the, I guess, Istanbul cultural heritage before the new mayor came. He also was talking about meeting me. So even like people from both sides of the politics seem to be like what I do and how I handle this issue, because there's also a way to highlight Byzantium as in the Turks do not belong here and they should go somewhere to Central Asia or something like that. And like I have a huge following from the Turkish public who know that that is not what this project is about at all. That is just a neutral presentation of the history and heritage that was here before. So anyway, there's a lot of people who like what I'm doing, and especially in academia, I have lots of people who've connected with me. I've talked with them, met them when they come to Istanbul. But that's going to be an organizational issue once this thing is funded, how that would work. But definitely, it's very clear, especially in some smaller towns, that people really like what I'm doing, and they would like me to publicize their work, their sites, their museums, or whatever.
That's the highest form of flattery, isn't it? That's great.
Yeah, I would say yes.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you. We have another question from Carol Schneier. Have you thought about creating self-guided walking tours where a series of related sites could be strung together in a walk?
Yes, I mean, so this is, I mean, first of all, I've had some people who've contacted me. I have lots of Google like maps I've made with Google Maps, and I've had people contact me and say, "Thank you so much. You've made all these maps. I know what I'm going to do on my weekends." And so people are already using my maps to see certain places. So that's like a deeper thing. It is also where I had to be careful. How much do I share or not share, whatever. But this is, if I have funding, I would really like to make apps that really create tours, show, first of all, maybe show the main monuments, to create different tours, create itineraries, also with audio and video to help give a basic overview. So this is very much, this is basically one of the things that made this project. I was actually not imagining people would use this in universities, which they are definitely doing this. It was more for the public, and that's always been something I would love to do. I need funding and help because I don't also know how to make apps. I hope that answers your question, though.
I personally have a question for you, David,
Mm-hmm.
Because you have been monitoring and visiting all these sites for nearly a decade. How would you evaluate their preservation? And how, okay, the condition, their condition, from my personal experience, their condition 10 to 15 years ago was quite pity for many of them. It has changed dramatically for some of them. How would you evaluate this process? Does the Turkish state pay attention to the Byzantine heritage, particularly as a cultural heritage of Turkey? Is there any, let's say, political issue for not preserving some of these monuments? I have to be honest, I live in Bulgaria, and we know that the Balkan countries, the former Ottoman territories, like for instance Bulgaria and Greece, had, or other countries that were liberated from the Ottoman Empire in the 19th century, had for more than a century a very negative political attitude towards the Ottoman legacy and Ottoman heritage. That's why we don't wonder why many of the Ottoman monuments disappeared. We know that in Turkey, there was probably some historical connection to this attitude. Not mandatorily, maybe more ignorance, maybe less politics than in Greece, Bulgaria, and other countries in the past. It was changing, but we are interested to hear your perspective on that. And general medieval and late medieval heritage, what's the destiny of this heritage and how it has changed for a decade, for the last decade?
Yeah, so this is a very, very complex topic because for many reasons. So first of all, almost everything that's Byzantine inside the walls of Istanbul, old Istanbul, Constantinople, was Ottoman. What survived, by and large, has an Ottoman heritage, and how that is interacted with is a very complex political issue. So you have a kind of neo-Ottomanism that wants to basically, even something that's in ruins, rebuild it. So there's actually two church mosques that were in ruins that were rebuilt, and two more that are on the way probably. And so it is to highlight their Ottoman heritage. And it's very, very complicated. Even after the conversion of Hagia Sophia in Istanbul, what's very interesting is the Hagia Sophia in Trabzon, which was converted in a way that the local people did not like, that it basically, the naos had a kind of like a box-like structure that kept you from seeing the dome and almost any defining feature. They removed that. They now have access. You can now view the dome much more clearly, and they even pull up the carpet and let you see this amazing opusictile floor, which was not the case before the pandemic. So it's interesting to see certain places like, okay, we did the Hagia Sophia thing, but now let's show you some other places better. One of the really complicated topics on this point is conservation in general, which is not an easy topic to begin with. Different organizations have different control over different things. So the religious foundations control the mosques that were Byzantine churches. And there's a very wide range of ways these monuments have been restored. So the conservation is problematic. So you have Pantokrator Zeyrek, which many people consider to be very controversial. More recently, Vefa Church Mosque. There's some problems with it, but they restored the mosaic of the Virgin and Christ Child in an amazing way, and they display in the garden all the remains of Byzantine finds in a very, very fantastic and wonderful way. One of the best collections of Byzantine marbles. So you have the normal issues of conservation. Some people really want to just make everything look like it's new. And so that's one of the problems, is also restoring it to make it look like it's new. And that's not just a problem for Byzantine monuments. And there's just so much in Turkey. There's so much in this country. So I think now it's not as much of a problem as there were places in the past. So definitely monuments were intentionally destroyed in the past, in the 40s and 50s. And sometimes they actually like, even the people who want to convert Hagia Sophia into mosque, they like to go and find these Byzantine monuments and highlight them. It's very, very, very complex. And it's not easy to say one thing about it, I would say. I don't know if that answers your question very well. Did you have any other? Did you have anything else that you wanted to ask?
Yes, I have a question for you. Actually, through the question is of Jem Aliyev. Can you tell us more about some interesting mosaics from the Roman period in Constantinople?
Yeah. So I mean, one of the most incredible finds recently is in the old municipality building in Zeytinburnu, just outside of the city. It's, I don't know, 2016, 17, 18. They were restoring this old building and they found an amazing mosaic, late antique mosaic, possibly from a late Roman, early Byzantine villa, not far from the sea. And they continued to excavate into the car park and found more, which they removed. And they're going to this will be a cultural center, and one part's going to showcase this amazing late antique mosaic. Not many people know about this, but there are other mosaics that were found in the city, late antique mosaics. And Aya Irene actually has a close to the public mosaic museum. So the atrium is full of mosaics on all three sides. If you look through the window, you can see a couple of imperial sarcophagi, porphyry sarcophagi, and a little bit on the wall. And there's an idea about 20 years ago to make it into a museum open to the public. The whole building is a bit complex now, but like they don't really want you to see it. The galleries are closed. Supposedly they're kind of doing some restoration. So who knows? Maybe in the future it will actually be open to the public. So that's several different mosaics they found from the different parts of the city have been moved there. And of course, Kora, Hagia Sophia, other monuments actually have their mosaics. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. And another question from Karol Schneier. How do you balance presenting the architectural details of a site, which are visible to the viewer, with presenting the historical context of the culture when the site was active, which is invisible to the viewer?
This is, of course, something I would like very much to develop more, but I tried to just give a basic overview of the history. And what's very, very interesting about Byzantine monuments of the city is we have hundreds of churches recorded, and a huge number of the churches that we have now, we don't know what they are. So we only have information about some. So for example, with Sergius and Bacchus, we know that it was somehow connected to the palace of Justinian. There's some controversy about this. At some point in time, Monophysite monks were there from Syria, that Theodora. Iconoclasts kind of were torturing some of the iconodules there. There's some interesting connections with the papacy there. This is a building we have more information about, but many of the monuments we have, we can't say much because, okay, maybe it was made in 900. It could have been this, or this. We don't know. So it's actually a very curious thing that so many of the churches of the city, we do not know what they were for sure. And so preventing the historical context becomes very complicated if we don't even know, was this the church that the emperor was coming to on processions, or is this a church we don't even know? Is it this one? Is it that one? So you can talk about it in a more general way, which I would need a lot more help to do, but the specific historic context is not always, actually perhaps for half of the churches of the city, and depends on the monuments. So the walls, of course, we have a lot more. And that's, of course, infinitely complicated because so many different armies came up to the walls. And there's also, it's the walls in civil wars and things like that. So that's where you actually can just overwhelm anyone, including scholars.
Yep.
Yeah, I hope that answers the question. It's very complex.
Yep. Next question is from Alp Joskun. Are you planning to do any guided tours like the one tomorrow in the future?
Well, actually, the pandemic very much affected this. I had just really started organizing them before the pandemic. And actually, the last one I did was about 2 years ago. So this is the first one. Definitely, there's plans for that. And with the social media that I have, I think it'd be very nice to also create much bigger itineraries. I would love to organize a tour of both, like maybe a week tour, both of Istanbul and Thessaloniki. But that's like the pandemic has interrupted this, and actually Sheriff and I have actually postponed the tour twice already. We had been talking about doing it about a month and a half ago. And of course, this Omicron variant, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, that's a very, very complex issue because the pandemic is still hopefully slowly being over. But yeah, I would like to do a lot more, though, for sure. And to be also, was starting to do this, and it seems like I'm going to do more. Also, pro bono, for no money, working with universities to help also them have field trips. So I worked with Bilgi Istanbul University and Coach for this kind of thing. So I'd like to do more of that as well.
Thank you, David. I have another question for you. I mean, from what you have experienced, do you think there is an integrated policy towards preservation of all these sites, or there is a fragmented effort here and there to preserve these sites? Because obviously there is an effort in Istanbul to preserve the Byzantine heritage, what we have seen. And my next question is about the weight. I mean, first, you have a lot of information and data about Istanbul. What is your, center of your website and the Byzantine Legacy website and social media? What is the second center? I mean, not conceptually, but realistically. I mean, what you have. I mean, where is your data from on the second place after Istanbul? From European Turkey, from Bithynia, from which area of the Byzantine world it comes from?
Okay, so first of all, about preservation. I mean, it's very complex. One of the things that's an issue is that you have the Ministry of Culture and Tourism, which is responsible for cultural sites, and then you have the religious foundations, which are responsible for restoring mosques and things like that. And it becomes even more complicated because Hagia Sophia both are officially over Hagia Sophia. And I don't think that's even an integrated thing that's happened with Hagia Sophia itself yet. I don't know what's going on more recently, but that's something that some people who are on the board have discussed already. So there's having these two organizations and also who's in charge of them. And there are certain kinds of policies, but also, yeah, it is very, very complicated. And also there's the local municipality, Fatih municipality, and the new mayor with the greater municipality. They're also in competition and actually trying to do, for example, one's restoring the walls, another is destroying all the slums and trying to make a garden. But it's not a very integrated thing because of this. But I'm I can't say much more than that because I don't know the full details of this, but it's very complicated. And there's also who's in charge of the site and what they do as well. And maybe Coach University, for example, is putting money into it, like they're doing in St. Euphemia, which not many people know, will be an amazing museum near the Hippodrome with late medieval frescoes. So the other part is very complex. I mean, theoretically, if I have funding and a lot of help, my idea would be to do the Byzantine Commonwealth. Let's say that on quotation marks, not to take it too seriously as a concept. The most thorough things I've done has been in Bithynia and Thrace. So I try to visit every site. But for my project, I mean, the texts are still quite weak, but Thessaloniki, Sofia, Athens, Ravenna. I mean, Ravenna and Thessaloniki in particular do a very great job of helping understand how some of these monuments looked. For example, how Sergius and Bacchus looked in late antiquity, because we have all these late antique monuments, including San Vitale in Ravenna, that is its kind of sister building. So this really helps understand. Thessaloniki has, you know, all of these monuments from many different periods of times with a lot more of its art than you can find in Istanbul in many cases. So these two, I really have a huge photo archive. The texts are hit or miss. I need to really develop them a lot more. Yeah, so that would be, I guess, so the most thorough is Thrace and Bithynia, as like trying to visit all the monuments I can. Yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, David. Next question from Karol Schneier. How do you counteract the negative associations with the Byzantine Empire culture, e.g. something complex and obscure is labeled Byzantine, with a cultural bias towards Rome and the Western Roman Empire?
Well, I mean, first of all, I just try, I mean, with the social media, I mean, I have a very, very, let's say, light touch. I don't try to push anything. This is just this building, this fresco, this mosaic, you know, this architectural detail from this building, whatever. So with social media, which can be a very nasty world, as we know, I try to have like, it's like no one knows, like no one's necessarily going to know who I am. I try to really minimize myself in the project and show, here's this building, take a look at it. And I don't fight with anyone on social media. Like, unless someone asks me questions, I'm not going to interact with them if they're trying to say something. So there's very weird negative associations or strange associations with the Byzantine Empire. And of course, there's these people who think, you know, the pagan past was greater and Christianity ruined everything, for example. And all someone has to do is look at Hagia Sophia, for example. Okay, everything went downhill after Constantine, obviously. So I just show people can see, people are going to have their biases, and you can't fight it directly, but by just showing this heritage and the wonderful monuments and wonderful art from different periods of time, hopefully this can have something that helps people understand that this is much more complex and beautiful and rich and interesting and deserves its own attention. But there are other very strange associations with Byzantium as a concept. So with the social media I have, so it's about 148,000 on 3 different platforms. 25% of them are Turkish, and almost no one has anything negative to say. They understand that I'm respectful to all the layers of the history of this region. And this is just another part of it. The problem I have, of course, is sometimes, for example, if I show something from Nesebar, maybe Greeks and Bulgarians start a fight with this. But another very weird thing in Western Europe is actually that the Byzantines represent the Crusaders against Islam, which is, of course, completely crazy and an ironic claim, considering the Crusaders destroyed the city. But I don't try to fight anything directly. I just try to fight these negatives, to counteract these negative associations by just showing the different aspects of the architecture and art. I hope that answers your question enough.
Okay, another tricky question: Byzantine or Eastern Roman?
So someone asked about this. Is it Byzantine or Eastern Rome? Yeah, I mean, this is of course very complex. I mean, another problem I have to deal with this kind of language is that Istanbul is a Constantinople, and people on social media can be very angry if I use one or both. I try to even add the Ottoman Constantiye to remind that also it was Constantinople or Constantiye. Yes, this is a very complex issue, and of course it was Rome. It was always Rome, so I do try to remind. Also, I should do it more myself. Say this was Rome. This was not, Byzantium. It was Rome, and I remember there's a Facebook group that's very obsessed with only using the word Rome. And they recently basically wished that Avril Cameron would die by being so angry with her using the word Byzantium. A German scholar I know has said, this is of course problematic, but we already have a problem with people not knowing this. So if you start playing around with this and say Eastern Rome, that's gonna make it maybe even more obscure than using the word Byzantium. So and Byzantium was the name that the Eastern Romans used for the city I'm in, and it is focused on the city. So it's very complex for sure. And I should also myself be reminded to say this was Rome myself in my social media. So I know that's not a very good answer, but I hope goes some way in saying something.
This was a very good answer. Actually, I would like to remind our visitors and participants tonight that there are two perspectives towards the Byzantine heritage. What's called Byzantine? One of them is the global perspective, and this is the perspective of most of Western Europe and the East and America. Byzantine is, the eastern part of Europe. I mean, this is the civilization in the eastern part of Europe and some parts of Asia that was influenced by the Orthodoxy and the Eastern Roman Empire throughout the Middle Ages. But there is another perspective, and this is the local perspective, what is Byzantine, for the especially the Balkan and Caucasian countries and historiographies. Byzantine is exclusively belonging to the political and cultural sphere of the Eastern Roman Empire, and not to the countries that belong to this Commonwealth, as Dmitry Obolensky mentioned and created this term, Byzantine Commonwealth. And in Bulgaria, for instance, in Bulgarian historiography, Byzantine is something exclusively not Bulgarian, not belonging to the medieval Bulgarian empires. Or in Serbia, this is something exclusively not belonging to the medieval Serbian kingdom and empire. So these are two different concepts, and they need to come closer to each other because they create a lot of noise in the perception. What's your experience? How do you balance? How can you balance with these concepts? Because from the nationalistic point of view in Georgia, if you say that their heritage is Byzantine heritage, this will be very offensive. And in the same time, from the Western perspective, both Bulgarian and Georgian heritage is part of the Byzantine Commonwealth without anything offensive inside this concept.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely something on a theoretical level. I would, if this project, if I really can do the Byzantine Commonwealth, which of course I know is a very problematic concept, but this, these with the Orthodox Church connected to the Patriarchate of Constantinople, with local patriarchs as well, with patrons and artisans going back and forth, this shared cultural heritage, how to present that. This is something which I really would like to include. Georgia and of course Bulgaria and Serbia are sometimes controlled, whatever, we're sometimes controlled by the empire or not. How to do that, this is definitely something I would need to spend a lot more time with help thinking about this and how to, yeah, as you said, bring these two together. So since I haven't had to delve in this too much, I haven't had so many issues with this. And I don't want to just make, for example, Georgian culture like, oh yeah, this is just Byzantine, not discuss its local traditions, its local artisans, and its own independent political and cultural structures, and of course, a rich language. So that's something I really would have to work on and have a lot of help with in the future, how to deal with these in a way that is sympathetic and helpful to everyone. So that doesn't really answer your question, sorry.
So thank you, David. More questions from our guests? If not, I would like to thank you for the excellent presentation of this amazing project. This is the richest source of definitely of the current condition of a lot of Byzantine monuments spread across the Balkans and Anatolia, and especially in Istanbul. And thank you for this amazing presentation, David. We wish the Balkan Heritage Foundation to collaborate on this project in the future, and you know our intentions.
No, of course.
So,
thank you so much. Thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity, and also it's very good to do this with you as well, Yvonne.
Yeah, I would like to remind our guests that first, David Hendricks will continue working on this project and updating it. So it's a really useful source for Byzantine studies worldwide. Second, the BEMA seminars will continue in the next month, as you know, the first Saturday of the month, with another presentation dedicated to the Eastern Levant. It will be presented by our colleagues from the French Oriental Institute in Jerusalem and Israeli Antiquities Authorities, and it will be dedicated to a Neolithic site called Shar HaGolan, and the topic will concern the early Neolithization of the Levant and the emerging Neolithic in the Eastern Mediterranean. So Shar HaGolan will be presented by Julien Vic, a French scholar in Jerusalem, and Anna Eric Rose from Israeli Antiquities Authorities. These are our colleagues in another endeavor that we are starting with Balkan Heritage. Balkan Heritage is expanding, so this year we're opening our first research and field school project in Israel together with our colleagues there. So we'll be pleased to present this amazing Neolithic site very close to the Galilee Sea in northeastern Israel. Just to remind you that the Balkan Heritage Field School also just opened for enrollment, and after 2 years, pause of 2 years, we are resuming our activities, and also together with the new Bulgarian universities, we'll be happy to have new students from across the globe to our master program dedicated to the Balkan and Eastern Mediterranean archaeology. Thank you very much, and have a nice day or evening depending on where you are.